everyone, and welcome to another Brush and Bubbles tutorial. Today I'm going to take you through with step-by-step instructions and guidance of your very own penguin painting. This is a super fun and relaxing painting to do. You can do it with the kids, it's kid friendly. You could even enjoy doing it yourself and then gift it to some lucky person. But I'm going to talk you through everything nice and slowly, step by step. You can change up the colours of your painting too, so don't feel like you have to follow along with the colours I'm using. You can use any colours and shades that you wish. I'm going to start by firstly just talking you through everything that I'm going to be using to create this painting. So to start with, I would just cover up your table with some tablecloth or old newspaper or even an old towel. I have 3 different size paintbrushes for this painting. I might not use all 3 of them, but it's just nice to have them on standby. I have my square shaped brush. I'll be using this to mix up my paint colours and also painting the background. It's a little bit bigger than the others. I've then got a medium pointy brush and then a teeny tiny pointy brush. I also have a pencil which I'm going to use to sketch in my penguin. I have my canvas, but you don't have to use a canvas, you can use a piece of paper or card if you wish. Some kitchen towel just to dab my brushes on, a glass or a pot of water. I have a couple of paper plates here which I'm going to be using as my palette. I then have an assortment of acrylic paints here. Once we get started, I'll be showing you which paint colours I'm using, but like I mentioned before, please feel free to change up your paint colours if you wish. So before we get started with our actual painting, we're just going to spend a moment just sketching in where our penguin's going to go. So I'm going to have the penguin's head sort of coming out from the bottom of my canvas. And all this is a little bit like an oval shape or an upside down egg. So taking my pencil, I'm just going to very lightly, don't push too hard, you don't want to push down on the canvas too hard. I'm just going to draw in where my penguin shape's going to go, just using that kind of upside down egg shape. Once you've done that, I'm just going to draw in the little wings that are going to stick out from either side. So these are just little shapes like this. Once you've drawn in your wings, we're now going to add a little bit of detail. So we want to add a sort of M shape up here for the top of the penguin's head. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to do it quite curved. So the M shape is going to curve around, come down, curve up and around again. And then once I've done that sort of very curvy M shape, I'm going to bring it all the way down either side, just following that original line that we've already done for the outside of the body. And then once we have that shape in, we're going to work on some of the details. So I'm going to find this middle bit of the M and I'm going to bring my pencil down slightly, and this is where I'm going to draw the penguin's nose. So I'm going to do a bowl shape for the penguin's nose. So I'm just doing a little line like that and then a curved line underneath. So it looks a little bit like a bowl or a semicircle. Once you've done that shape, I'm going to do the penguin's eyes. So these are just little circles and they sit roughly here and here. So wherever you've got this curve of the M, they're underneath that. So I would just start smaller. We can always make them bigger. Just going to do 2 circles in that space. So now we have the very rough outline of our penguin. So I'm going to pop my pencil down and we're going to move over to our paints now. So this is your chance to pop all of the paints that you want to into your palette. I would always recommend having some white paint in there. So we're going to add our paints to our palette now. So we're going to start with some black and some white paint. You're going to need more white than black. Next up, I'm going to add some red and some yellow paint. And lastly, I'm going to pick the colour that I'm going to have for my background. So I'm going for a blue background with my painting, but you can do any colour or shade that you wish. Once you have all of your paints in your palette, we're going to move over to the fun bit, because we're going to start by mixing up the colour that we want to paint in our background. So like I said, I'm going to go for a blue background with my painting, but I'm going to mix up my own blue shade because I want it to be lighter than the colour that I've already got in my palette here. So I'm going to pick up my medium brush, whichever brush you've got that's bigger. I'm just going to dip it in the water just to loosen up those bristles a little bit. And then I would just dab it on the kitchen towel. I'm then going to scoop up about 3 or 4 scoops of my white paint, and I'm moving it over to my other paint palette because this is going to act as my base. So I've got my paint here, and now to this white I'm just going to start adding a little bit of blue at a time. I'm going to give it a mix until I'm happy with the shade of my blue for the background. When you're happy with your colour, we're now just going to move over to our canvas, and this is the really fun bit because we're just going to paint in all of the background. So what I would say is just be really careful as you come up to these pencil marks that we've already used to draw in our penguin. If you want to, you can always switch over to one of your smaller brushes just to get into all the nooks and crannies so you have lots of control and you're not going over your lines. Once you've finished your background colour, we can then just give our 2 brushes a really good wash in the water. What we're going to do next is we're going to move on to creating the colour for our penguin's beak. So I'm going to go for an orange colour for this. So I need to mix up an orange colour using my red and my yellow paint. So picking up my clean brush, any size that you want, I'm using my medium one. I'm just going to scoop up 1 scoop of my yellow and I'm just moving over to a space. And then I'm going to pick up 1 scoop of my red and I'm going to add it to the yellow. And I'm going to give it a good mix. Now it's up to you how bright you want your beak to be. So I want mine to be a little bit more orangey. So I'm just going to pick up some more of my yellow and I'm going to mix it into this colour. Once you've given that a nice mix, I'm just going to add a scoop of my white to it, just to lighten it up ever so slightly. I'm just mixing that in. So before I go ahead and paint that onto my beak, I'm just going to wash my brush and pop it down. I like to give my brush a little tap on the base of the cup just to lift off any of the excess paint. We're now going to move over to one of our smaller brushes, just so we have a little bit more control with this. Taking my small brush, I'm just going to pick up some of my orange paint, and we're now just going to carefully fill in our beak area. So we just want to make sure that we're being very careful and we're not going over the lines too much. When we've added in the beak, we're now just going to wash off our little brush. We're going to move on to painting in the 2 eyes. For the eyes, we're going to move over to our black paint. So I'm just going to pick a little bit of my black paint up, still using my smallest brush, just so I can have some control. And we're just going to do exactly the same thing as we did with the beak. We're just going to carefully fill in these 2 circles that we've got for the eyes, making sure you're not going over the lines too much, but don't worry if you do. And also don't worry too much if your lines are wonky or wobbly. We want our penguins to have lots of character and be nice and individual. So don't be too hard on yourself if the lines aren't neat or straight. They really don't need to be. When you finish the eyes, we're now going to move on to painting in the outside parts of our penguin. So this is the section up here at the top of the head where the M is, all along the sides of the body and also the wings. So hopefully your background should be nice and dry now, and you can use any size paintbrush that you like. You might like to switch between them again, but we're just going to carefully start filling in all of that section. As a little tip, what I like to do is load up my paintbrush with the paint, and then when you come to paint it on, if you just push the bristles down of the brush and drag the paintbrush along nice and slowly and carefully, it lets those bristles fan out, and if you just carefully drag your hand along, you can just get a nice crisp line at the edge where you've used your pencil marks. So you can always give that a practice as well if you like. We're going to move on to the final touches of our penguin painting now. So what I want to do is I want to leave a little bit more time for the eyes and the beak to dry before we go in and add some more details. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus back onto our background because I want to add some snowflakes into our background sky. So for this, I have quite a fun technique that we can use. So I like to take one of my brushes, and what I'm going to do is I'm not going to use the bristle side, I'm going to use the other side of the brush. And I'm just going to pick up a little bit of white paint. You can see it goes to a nice little peak at the end. And then what you can do is just very carefully press this paint onto your background, and it gives you a nice little dot. So what we're going to do is we're just going to cover our background with randomly placed dots. We'll have some closer together, some further apart. If you push down really lightly, you'll get a tiny little dot. If you push down a little bit firmer, you should get a bigger snowflake. So you can just spend some time adding as many or as little of these as you want all over your background. As soon as we've added in our snowflakes, we can now move back over to one of our smallest brushes. I'm going to go for my tiny one here. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up a little bit of watery black paint. And with this, we're just going to draw a little curve here on the beak, just to symbolise a little smile on our penguin's mouth. So I'm going to scoop up a small amount of my black, and I'm just moving it to a spare area of my painting palette. And then to this, I'm just going to add a few drops of water. And I'm going to give it a really, really good mix, just so that water blends in with that paint. Now the reason why we do this is it just allows our paint to be a little bit thinner and more delicate when we come to painting it onto our penguin. If you don't want to use black paint, you can always use a black pen or a black felt tip pen. So once I've mixed that up, I'm just going to prepare my brush. So you can see that I've got quite a lot of paint on the end of this brush, and I don't want too much paint on there, just so I can control what I'm doing. I'm going to push the bristles of my brush down onto my palette, and then I'm going to carefully twist the handle of my brush. And if you just drag your brush along, creating a little snail trail, it brings your paintbrush to a really nice peak at the very end. So you have a little bit more control when we come to painting in the smile. So just make sure you're preparing your brush. You can practice this on your palette or a piece of paper before if you like. And then as soon as you're ready to go, what we're going to do is just move over to our painting. We're just going to paint this onto the beak. Now, remember, it's okay to be wobbly. It's okay that it's not neat. We want our penguin to have lots of character and charm. So please don't worry if it doesn't look perfect. There's no such thing. So I'm just taking my paintbrush and I'm just going to very carefully do a little sort of curved line around, still following along with that bowl shape that we painted in originally. And I'm only pushing my paintbrush down very, very lightly. We're going to just add a final detail to our penguin's eyes. So taking the other side of my brush again, I'm just going to dip it back into the white paint. And I'm just going to do two tiny little dots on the upper left-hand side of my penguin's eyes, just to give it a little bit of sparkle. And there we have our completed happy penguin painting.